Hi, I'm Buna with Garden Inspire. We're here at Basil and Rose with Gene Sturr. He's going to talk about making food for survival situations. Thanks for coming, Gene.
You're very welcome. What we're going to cover tonight is real simple. We're going to cover some of the basics that the pioneers and the early settlers used. Some of those things were jerky, parched corn, pemmican, and what's up here in the front looks like road bricks is hardtack. And the recipe for the hardtack is actually a Civil War recipe that I found. Okay? If you look into some of the old stories of the pioneers, Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett, and some of the others, they went out in the wild carrying basically two things, parched corn and jerky. With those two things, they had a survival food. Parched corn is nothing more than dried corn. As you see these ears here, these have hung in my garage for over a year.
So is this sweet corn?
This is sweet corn. You can also use Indian corn.
So is that like popcorn or corn you would grind?
This is the decoration corn from Halloween.
Okay.
This is your Indian corn, and it makes really good parched corn. The fun thing about parched corn is when you've got it done, you can eat it just as it is, kind of like corn nuts, but I think better.
Oh, definitely better. I don't like corn nuts.
And you can also grind it. The pioneers, the early settlers, my ancestors, on the Mayflower, they learned to do this from the Indians, and it was carried on through. The Indians would then grind this with their stone grinders. I use a mortar and pestle. You can grind that into a flour. You can use that as a thickener for soups. You can also take that and put that into a cup with some water and make a gruel, like a porridge.
So could you use popcorn?
I don't know if you could use popcorn or not. I haven't tried it, but I think.
Do you think you could use the corn?
I think if you tried popcorn, you're going to be using something on top of it to catch it. Because this as you can hear, this is popping a little bit. It's cracking and crackling, and we've already had a couple of kernels come out of the frying pan already.
So did you grease that at all?
No.
So just a cast iron skillet?
Cast iron skillet,
there.
And I use just a little bit of salt. I use the real salt. That's the one I prefer. You can hear it popping as it cracks in there.
How do you know when it's done?
Just watch it. Don't let it burn. That's why I'm stirring it all the time. Use a wooden spoon. Don't use the recipe I found and uses nothing but just corn and salt. I've read a few that said, oh, you put the bacon grease in there. Well, the bacon grease is going to go rancid on you, or any kind of grease has got the potential going rancid. This doesn't. This is not going to go rancid on you.
So once that's done and it cools off, how should you store it?
Just store it in they didn't have plastic bags. Just store it in a small cloth bag or something of that nature. Let it breathe, let it get some air into it.
So not a glass jar or something?
I wouldn't put it in a glass jar.
Okay.
We've got some miniature popcorn
right
there.
Oh yeah, look at that.
some of the Indian corn is popping into popcorn on us. But that's all it takes to do.
Okay.
Okay.
And how long does that keep? Like forever?
It will keep indefinitely. If you keep it dry, you keep it where it doesn't get into moisture, it will keep literally indefinitely, as far as I've been able to find.
Okay.
And yes, we're getting some of the Indian corn that's popping into popcorn, which is I've never had happen before. But this is one of the staples that was used by the pioneers, was the parched corn. If you read into some of the history books, and as I have read some of the histories, they carried parched corn and jerky. Now the jerky I make is what I'm going to talk about tonight. The jerky I make is totally different from commercial jerky. Now I've got a bag of commercial jerky down here, and I don't want to give these people, and I'm just going to read what's in it. It says, ingredients: beef, water, sugar, brown sugar, contains 2% or less of salt, beef stock, flavors, soy sauce, sweet soybean salt, hydrolyzed corn protein, yeast extract, maltodextrin, citric acid, pineapple powder, contains wheat and soy.
And often they include MSG and nitrates.
And nitrates and other things as well. In a survival situation, and I've taught survival with hunter education for 26 years, I've taught it for longer than that. I've been doing this for about 40 years. You've got to get, if you're suffering hypothermia, you've got to get something in you that's hot. Not just hot water, but you need to have something. Hot coffee, hot chocolate, whatever. If you can put some protein and something nutrients in it to eat, that's even better. But you've got to get something in you. Most people die of hypothermia, not at 32 degrees below zero or freezing. They die at 40 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Get out in the summertime. Get out in the summertime. Watch what get good and sweaty. Have a wind come up, and you're cold. So you want to watch that. Once you get, if you get hypothermia, you've got to get something hot in you. The jerky I make, I can take this jerky, and I can take it, brush it up in a cup, throw it in with some hot water, and I can make a broth that I can drink. It's something that I can drink and you can drink as well.
Is that the jerky that you gave me that one time to
Yes.
try? That was really good.
Yeah, this is my homemade jerky. What you want is you want a lean cut of meat. Now you can see this piece of roast has got a piece of fat down the side. You want to be able to cut that off and trim it off. Don't cut it too thin. If you cut it real thin, you're going to wash it off your trays. I use a regular food dehydrator to make my jerky. I don't use a freeze dryer. I don't use a fan. I use this dehydrator that I've got right here in front of me. I put it in here for 24 hours. At 12 hours, I rotate the shelves and I turn it over. I make my jerky really, really dry. And I do that on purpose because it will store for a longer period of time. Jerked meat, by definition, is nothing more than dried meat. Now, a lot of people will smoke it in their smoker or their barbecue grill, whatever. What I use is liquid smoke. I use this particular brand of liquid smoke because it is nothing but liquid smoke or smoke and water. I also use a little bit of minced garlic because I like it. Okay, you don't have to. I just let it sit in the.
So no salt at all.
I put no salt in it. I don't put anything else in it. It's just these two things and some water. I let it sit in the refrigerator in a steel bowl overnight. Stir it up. Put it in the dehydrator and let her run.
And then how do you store it after it's dry?
After it's dry, I'll put it in a plastic bag or a seal meal bag and store it that way. I've had some jerky that I've used. I carry in my survival kits. I've had some that's 2 years old, and it's still good.
So when I make
moldy.
jerky, it doesn't last that long because it gets eaten.
Well, yeah, it does around my house too, especially when I had kids. But just me, I will set it aside and leave it. Okay. That's the easiest way that I've found to make jerky. A lot of people don't like it because they say, well, it doesn't taste good. It doesn't have this flavor or that flavor.
So instead of beef, have you ever used another kind of meat?
I have used venison, antelope, and elk.
Okay.
Eventually I want to play with some other brands, but you can use, literally you can jerk any kind of meat. You can jerk turkey, chicken. I'm going to try some rabbits later on sometime this year.
I've had moose.
Pardon?
Moose.
You definitely could do moose.
Because I've had moose jerky.
Yes. So. The thing is, you're looking for a cut of meat that has very little marbling in it. And this is where wild game is better because wild game has no internal marbling. All the fat on wild game is on the outside of the meat, like this piece of fat right here. There is no marbling in the middle of any wild game any game that I've ever butchered. Elk and deer and antelope. So that makes your best jerky because you don't have to worry about how much fat is actually in the meat itself. And I make it the same way.
So maybe you had more to say about the jerky.
No?
So hardtack, I remember reading history books, fiction, nonfiction. I never knew what parched corn was before, so now I know and I've tried it. And hardtack, it was always somebody crossing the plains or on a ship or whatever, and they talked about being wormy.
Yeah.
So it always sounded terrible. This looks actually much better than what I imagined because it doesn't have that in it. So how do you make that?
Okay, what I use, I have my wheat grinder is an all grain. And what I did was I took hard white wheat and I put it in there and I put it on a half course. So this is not a real fine grind.
By all grain you mean any
That's
kind
the
of
name. That's the name of the grinder.
Oh, okay.
It's called an all grain. I don't even think they make them anymore. I bought mine a long time ago, and it's stone ground.
Okay, so that is what kind of grains in it?
This is just strictly hard white wheat,
Okay.
okay?
Okay, I'm gonna, we've got some questions from the audience.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine, let's go for it.
Tammy Anderson would like to know, how do you store it? Like in a Ziploc bag or?
How do I store which?
The hardtack?
Yes.
Hardtack can be stored in a Ziploc bag. I've actually got some in a Tupperware container. On board ships, they just stacked it up on board ships in cloth bags because that's what they had.
But we don't want worms in it.
We don't want worms in it, so
maybe-
you want to store it in some kind of airtight container. An easy way to store it to make sure nothing gets to it is in a seal meal bag. Put it in a
Or-
Ziploc bag, in a
or
Ziploc
food
sandwich bag,
saver,
or a
like-
food saver bag. Yeah.
Were there other questions?
Any
Rex?
other-
She was I'm sorry, she was asking about the jerky.
The jerky,
Oh.
same way. You can put it in a Ziploc bag.
Do you need to make sure all the air is out
You
as
wanna-
possible?
you want-
You've dried it.
Once you've dried it, once you've got it good and dry. Here's the thing, my jerky is very, very dry, okay? If I take that piece of jerky, it doesn't bend. It pops in half. Okay, that is, I've had people tell me it has the consistency of cardboard. Okay,
It tastes much better though.
it tastes a lot better, but
So, Tammy says thanks.
you're very welcome.
Okay. Sorry to.
That's fine.
So the hardtack is the ground white wheat with what else?
Salt and water.
And how much of each?
Very little salt, about a tablespoon. I think it was a half a tablespoon of salt to 2 cups of flour and just enough water to get it wet.
Okay.
And then you roll it out into different thicknesses. I used this as thicknesses I rolled out on a cookie sheet, stuck it in the, cut it, you have to cut it first, and then you have to puncture it first while
So
it's
that's
wet.
maybe a half inch, maybe?
About 3/8 of an inch or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then did you just use a fork or
I
what
used
did you?
I used a skewer, metal
Okay.
skewer, to skewer it. You have to let the gases escape as it dries. You dry it at 250 degrees for 2 hours, turn it over, dry it for another 2 hours at 250 degrees, and you get road brick.
So did you, so did you dry this in your oven then?
Yes, I dried this
Okay.
in my oven.
Could you use a dehydrator?
You
If can
probably
set
could.
the
I haven't
temperature?
tried it in a dehydrator yet, but I did do it in the oven. I haven't done it in the sun oven yet. That's something I'll try later.
Okay.
I have made jerky in a sun oven, and it worked out pretty well.
And you brought some pemmican?
I brought some pemmican. Now, pemmican is an interesting type of food. Pemmican was made and originally made by the Indians, and it was introduced to the American pioneers and settlers here when they came here. Now, that particular batch is made with bacon fat. Pemmican is 3 things. It's equal parts of fat, powdered jerky, and fruit, some kind of dried fruit. That particular one is bacon fat, jerky, my jerky, and red raspberries.
Well, and I understand that they used a variety of wild fruits like
Yeah, and
cranberries, blueberries,
Whatever they
service
can find,
berries.
wherever you're at.
Right.
Okay, this is made with lard and strawberries and raspberries.
That looks a lot different.
Tastes different too. Try it.
So why is it so much lighter in color?
Because they use lard instead of bacon grease.
And the lard just is lighter
It's a
in
lighter
color.
thing.
Okay.
One of the things I want to try, and I'm going to do tonight, just for giggles and grins, is I've read recipes on it. A friend of mine that's in the mountain men told me about it, and that's to use honey to make your jerky, or make your pemmican. Now, this is jerky that I ran through a food processor.
So after it's like that, you were able to put it through a food processor?
Put it in the food processor, and we turned it into powder, okay? So we're going to dump some, I'm not measuring anything, we're going to dump some jerky in there. We've got some powdered strawberries and raspberries.
So are those some that you freeze dried?
No, these were ran through the dehydrator.
Okay.
These did not go through the freeze dryer, they went through the dehydrator.
So does it matter whether it's freeze dried or dehydrated?
Actually, the strawberries were through the freeze dryer.
Okay, so either way.
Yeah, these went both ways. The strawberries did go through the freeze dryer, and but it's dried fruit, okay? Now, as one of the mountain men told me, he said, Gene, he said, the best pemmican I've ever had was made with honey. Now, I cheat, guys. I like one particular type of honey. It comes from the Cache Valley. It's called Cox's Mountain Honey.
But the main thing is local
You
raw.
want local raw
honey.
honey. I don't
Yep.
care what it is. This is my personal preference, but I'm only going to put just enough in there to make it good and gooey, good and wet. And that may not be enough. I've never tried doing this before. This is a make a mess here on Buna's place and see what happens. But there's all kinds of different recipes for.
Should we kind of show that?
Yeah.
So people can sort of see.
I got some honey on my fingers. It's good honey.
So are you adding any fat to that?
The only fat I'm adding to this is the honey. I'm not
So
putting
no
any
lard or bacon fat?
no lard or bacon fat to this at all. This is going to be strictly with the honey. I've never tried this. I read a little bit about it, and it sounded interesting, and I thought, well, I'm running out of time. Let's just play it by ear and see what happens.
So did you hear anything about how that might keep as opposed to these?
I think it probably would keep real close to the same. I've read things about where people have found pemmican that was, you know, really, really old and was still good.
So one concern I would have is fats tend to go rancid,
And that is my concern as well.
but honey can keep a very long time.
They
So
have-
I would think this might actually keep longer.
I think the honey would keep longer. Okay.
It sounds tastier to me too.
I'm
I
about to
actually,
find.
I have tried the bacon one and it wasn't bad.
That's pretty good.
So you don't measure, you just mix kind of whatever you think. and-
Initially, okay, when you're using the fat, it's equal parts.
Okay.
Okay.
So for these, equal parts of the dried jerky, the dried fruit, and
the-
whatever
and
fat
whatever
it is.
fat I used.
Okay.
Okay, and it was just store-bought lard. Okay, and so that's, you know, that's what I ended up with. And if I mix it some more, I'm sure I could get it to shake up some more and probably put a little bit more honey in it. But that's what it looks like, and it tastes pretty good.
And these work, I guess, okay stored in plastic.
Yes, they would.
Could you store it in glass?
Yeah. The problem with glass is, okay,
It breaks.
it breaks, and if you happen to live someplace like along that front or any place where there's earthquake faults, glasses break. They don't bounce. And so you end up with food you can't eat.
Right.
Okay. Now, real quickly, these have cooled down enough
Okay.
that I'm going to scoop some into here.
So I just wanted to ask, for the pemmican, do you need to melt the lard
Yes.
or the bacon grease?
Yes,
Okay.
you need to melt it. And ideally, in recipes I've read, it said you want to render the fat. Okay. Some of the recipes talk about using the kidneys, fat off the kidneys of bison and things of that nature. Well, I don't have a bison tag lately, so.
But you don't have to grind it up or chop it up. You can just eat it
Yeah,
like
you can eat
this.
it just the way it is. Okay, let me find.
Which I have before. I haven't eaten it with the popcorn in it.
Well, I've never had the corn pop like that. But it's quite good, it's quite tasty. But you grind it up like this, and then you can add that to some water in a cup with some, and you can use that. The Indians and even the pioneers would grind up their parched corn and use it as a thickener for soups. They could use it in stews as a thickener, things of that nature. And it's really easy to do. This corn has hung in my garage off the rafters. It's just regular sweet corn. And it's hung on the rafters for about a year.
Does it take that long necessarily?
No.
Okay.
It
How
just-
long do you think?
You want to hang it till it's good and dry.
So probably a few months at
A
least.
few months at least.
Okay.
And once it's good and dry, you can take it, take it down, you can put it whatever. But hanging in the garage, like I have mine hanging in my garage, rodents can't get to it. The
Okay.
only rodent that could get to it's a bat, and they don't eat corn anyway, they eat bugs.
So we talked about making them, storing them. So if I have a preparedness kit in my car,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be a little concerned about the pemmican and the jerky because of potential fat going rancid.
Well, if you've got your jerky made with meat that doesn't have the marbling,
Then there's not really
then
a
it's not
concern.
going to go
Okay.
rancid on you. It will go rancid. Okay, if I took this piece of meat right here, this chunk right here, okay, and I left it just like that, and I put it in the food dryer, this fat is not going to dry out right. You've got marbling in here that's going to work the best for you. It will turn into jerky, and that's exactly what I've got here.
Okay.
Okay, but this does not have a 3 or 4 year shelf life.
So certainly the parched corn and the jerky and the hardtack you could have in your car kit.
Yes, you could.
Without a problem.
You could have that in your car kit without a problem. The one thing with hardtack, you have to remember this: your teeth are not going to be able to eat that. You have in the history I read of this one Civil War soldier, he said they would soak it in their coffee to get it to soften up to where they could eat it. They would also put it in their soups 10 to 15 minutes to where it would soften up enough to where they could eat it. It's that hard. You try to eat it like that, and you're going to go have your best friend's going to be your dentist.
So if you wanted to, just to make it a little more interesting, you could probably add other seasonings to the parched corn or the hardtack.
You could, yeah.
Just to make them more flavorful,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Whether you wanted it cinnamony or chili powder or whatever you wanted.
Whatever you want. The thing that I was trying to do here was try to keep it as simple as the pioneers would have had it.
Right.
Okay, hardtack, I've read articles where hardtack was used 1500s on sailing ships. And yes, it would get wet, then it would get mealworms in it and stuff of that nature. Keep it dry, keep it in a good environment, and the stuff will last, I think, probably longer than I will. And it's real simple. It's nothing more than flour, a little bit of salt and water, mix it up really good, roll it out flat, cut it in squares, puncture it so that it can dry out as it dries, and then bake it.
Okay, wonderful. That's some good information, kind of a history lesson too, since those are things talked about, and some great survival foods. Any other last words of advice related to this?
If you've got any questions, contact us and we'll answer them for you. I appreciate any questions that may be coming across on Facebook right now. We're trying to have fun with this. I've taught other classes. The biggest thing is keep an open mind. Okay? This jerky is not the store-bought stuff with the teriyaki and the hot peppers and all this other stuff.
Although
in
you
it.
could do that.
You could do that if you wanted.
But try to limit, the junk in there.
Yeah. The more junk you've got in this, the less likely it is to be able to save your life if you get into an emergency.
And some of this stuff could be pretty tasty, even though you think, it may not taste that good. Try it out.
Try it out. Make it to your tastes. But remember, the more spices you put in it, the more it's going to be harder for you to digest in an emergency.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Gene.
You're very welcome.
And thanks everybody for watching. And I hope you try some of these things out and have some emergency food for yourself.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks.